Hey everyone, this is Kalyn Kahler with Defector. I am starting a new project that I'm calling QB2, where I'm going to interview backup quarterbacks around the NFL. These are my favorite players because they know the most information. They're unheralded, and whenever they do get a chance to play, they're either celebrated, like Mike White was briefly last year, or they're eaten alive. And I just think these guys are so fascinating. So my first guest, I don't think he needs any introduction. You probably recognize him already from the many jerseys behind him, as we can see. This is Josh McCown. He played 19 seasons in the NFL for 12 different teams, including one UFL team. This is my favorite fact about you, actually, Josh. You're the last ever winner of the Pro Bowl's quarterback challenge before they phased that out. He played in the first regular season game outside of the United States. He's the oldest quarterback to ever make a postseason debut. And he very well might be an NFL head coach someday. So here's Josh McCown. And I've got my clipboard here, for the theme of this show. How are you, Josh?
Yeah, the clipboard is perfect. There's a way to hold that thing now so that you can write, perfectly in whatever conditions you're faced. But thank you so much, Kalyn, for having me on.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I picked QB2 as a theme for the show is that I think it's the best job in the NFL. And I want to know what you think of that. Do you agree with that, with my opinion? And do you even see yourself as a backup quarterback?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I would say any job in the NFL is a great job. It's the most popular sports league we have, and it's a fantastic fraternity to be a part of. And then within that, backup quarterback, a pretty good gig if you can get it. It's nerve wracking. You're in between kind of easy street and the hardest road, because the minute you're in the game, the expectations are for you to go in and perform well and help the team win. So it's a delicate balance, but it's a fun world to exist in. I think, especially if you love team, if you love those aspects of team, and because you get to kind of be around the group, be influential in the group, be right next to the franchise quarterback, hopefully helping him out. But then without the pressure of necessarily having to go out there every Sunday, week in and week out, perform. So it is a unique spot to be in, and one that's very very rewarding if you look at it the right way. But definitely a great job.
And one thing I wanted to ask you, following up on that, is when did you accept? Did you ever get to a point in your career where you were like, I am the backup now? Because, the start of your career, you were very much wanting to be a starter, thinking you were going to be a starter. And I think you even requested a trade from Detroit, 2006, I believe, thinking I still want to be a starting quarterback. So what point were you like, okay, this is who I am now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's important for, every player that's on that journey. You come into the league, however you come in going, okay, this is my path. I want to be a starter. I want to be a special teams player if you're a different kind of player, or if you're a quarterback, I want to be a franchise quarterback. But as you go, those things shift and things happen. And, got some opportunity there in Arizona to play, went to Detroit, wasn't a starter. John Kitna was a starter, backed him up for a year. And then I was on a 2-year deal, and going into the second year, I was like, man, I really want to play. So if you guys could trade me, I mean, I wasn't disgruntled. I enjoyed, that was one of my favorite seasons of my career, was that year in Detroit. But I was just like, if you guys could trade me to a team that maybe needs me to help them play, and it's going to play, then I would love that. And so I ended up in Oakland. We subsequently drafted Jamarcus Russell, but I got to play that year, and that was up and down. And usually, unless you're a first round pick, or you really pop in that first opportunity, like a Russell Wilson or somebody, your career as a backup, when you're kind of a stopgap guy, is you better hit it good when you get the opportunity, or you're going to kind of be in this carousel. And so I knew after Oakland, I thought things would be pretty dicey. Went to Miami, competed for that job. We ended up drafting Chad Henne and traded for Chad Pennington. I did not have a good camp, so totally understood those moves. and got traded to Carolina, where I backed up Jake Delhomme. And I think for me, that's when it settled in. And I was like, all right, this is who I am, and in order for me to have a career, I got to settle into this role and to, and to embrace it. And so had a great year that year. We were a very good football team, went 12-4, and just learned a lot from Jake and being around Jake, who had been a backup in New Orleans before he got his opportunity in Carolina. And it was a great experience. So probably 6 or 7 years in, where you really, things happen and you go, okay, in order for me to forge ahead, like nobody's walking up to me going, hey, here's a franchise quarterback deal. You got, 5 years to get it right. I had to embrace that role and try to do that, and had a, kind of a high school coaching stop there in between when I was out of the league and in the UFL. And I think that equipped me even better to, when I got back in, kind of in the league in more of a permanent basis, really embrace the role of being able to look at the game from a different lens, from a coach's lens a little bit, and not only help the quarterback in the room, but bring value to the team overall. And I just remember when I got back in the league and kind of embraced this, was just, you don't get to play every Sunday, but bring value every day. And that's important.
So you mentioned a word that I was going to ask you about, which you brought up the word stopgap. And there's a lot of words to describe backup quarterbacks. You've got bridge quarterback, stopgap, you've got journeyman, which is always used when talking about you. Are any of those words, like, do you like any of those words, or do you kind of get offended by any of those words? I'd love to know your thoughts on what is the best way to describe someone like yourself.
Yeah. But I think you left out retread, which is also a good one, which is the most affectionate. And, I like journeyman. Okay. I think just the word itself, at a glance, journeyman, that means he's been on a bunch of teams or whatever. But it is a journey. Life is a journey. And so to go, okay, man, this was part of my journey to be on these different teams. And just the number of coaches, players, equipment guys, training staff, all these people that you get to, custodians, everybody in a building that you get to go meet and be a part of is special. And while I think everyone would love to go, man, I'm going to go 20 years with the New England Patriots, or I'm going to go, I'm going to have this long career with one team, because that probably means you're playing well. This other road is not so bad, because you get exposed to so many other people's journeys, and they encourage your life, and hopefully in turn you encourage theirs, and it makes things better. So I like journeyman a little bit. Stopgap makes sense, because you're usually not the expectation is to hold for a little while, but not the permanent hold, So
yeah, and don't break.
So I understand it, and I think I embrace it. I have no issues with it.
Okay, that's awesome. I wanted to know, was there ever a game that you were not ready to play, where you're on the sideline, you're the backup, and you're just praying to God that no one gets hurt and you do not have to enter this game? Because I know you had a couple of situations in your career where you're entering a team mid-season. So did that ever happen to you?
Right. Yeah. I think my first stint in Chicago entered mid-season, and I had been out of the league, so I wanted to play so bad to hopefully get some tape and help my, get on more solid ground moving forward. But I felt, like I wasn't quite ready to play. So it was a mixed emotion where it's like, man, I want to play, but I don't know if I'm really ready right now. I've only been here 5 days or whatever. I ended up playing towards the end of the year, which worked out better. I can remember early in my career, I came off the bench for Jeff Blake when I was in Arizona, and got a couple of completions and moved the team pretty good up and down the field. I missed a throw late in the game to Brian Johnson on like a what we call a 7-pump or like a corner route, pump route, and I missed it. And I remember thinking I wasn't ready for that. Like I didn't practice that. That's one of those deals where a starter gets that unique rep in practice, and it really burned in my mind. Like you have to stay late and get all these other throws and get yourself ready. So I remember that moment not feeling ready as I should have been. And I don't think that's a coach's thing. I think that was the ownership that I needed to take, and it was a good lesson for me as a young player. So those are the things I look back at. I think every moment on Sunday, you're on the edge of your seat. You're helping the starter, and then all of a sudden he gets up slow, or something happens, and then your heart starts racing fast. You're like, "Am I ready? Am I ready?" But I think it goes back to the preparation. And what helped me later in my career was the more I helped. I felt like the more I helped the other guys on the team, the starter, the starting quarterback, receivers, anybody else, the more I was engaged in those meetings and helping guys, the better I felt on Sunday. If something did happen to the starter, because I'm like, man, I'm in this game plan. I'm internalized it because I've been helping other guys, and so it really for me was a great tool. But I didn't learn that until later in my career, and I think a lot of times when your mind is to chase, I need to be the franchise quarterback, and I can't wait to play, and the preparation of like the day in and day out, like what happens if I have to play in this game this week, you're not really ready for. You're like, I'll be good when they give me reps, but it's like, well, as a backup, you got to be good when they don't give you reps. So a lot of lessons learned on that front.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, like, in a regular game week as a backup, are you getting any first team reps at all? And if so, how many?
No, zero.
Yeah.
Zero. I mean, there are circumstances where like maybe you have a young quarterback that you're bringing along. And I remember with Jamarcus Russell, when we were bringing him along, he wasn't going to start, but we would give him reps in practice. So that's like kind of one of the hardest things is to have to give up reps, for guys not playing. But when you're in the backup role and you're not the franchise quarterback, you're not a top 5 pick, you're not some rookie in waiting, you're not getting any reps. And that for them, I think the value that you have is that they're able to say, we can trust you to perform without getting reps, but it's on you after practice to get the script, to look at this, like I was saying earlier, I learned young in my career, I'll get the script, look at the special throws that were made today, the new things that are in, and go out and throw those balls physically, get those throws, get what it feels like. Because that's what escapes you more than anything when you get on the field on Sunday is like, man, am I not ready for that throw? So, but yeah, 0 reps typically. And then, if you're behind an older quarterback or a guy that's maybe managing arm or just energy, then maybe you get thrown in there and you get a couple reps. It's usually all the handoffs. Like, hey man, take all the run game for me. So you're running in there and you're handing the ball out. You don't.
You're just like a body.
Yeah. Yeah, just like a body, So
that's awesome.
And there's tricks to the trade, sometimes you can, that a pass is coming up in the next rep and you don't say anything, you get to sneak one in there and the guy looks at you, hey man, what the heck, But for the most part,
God, that's
veteran
great.
quarterback, 0 reps in practice.
That's crazy. You brought up Jamarcus Russell, and that kind of made me think of the, at that point in your career, you're still thinking you can be a starter. They draft him. He's a rookie. You just mentioned he was stealing your first team reps. You had to give up some reps so that he can be learning. Are you at that point in your career, are you expected to mentor him? I know like Ryan Tannehill this offseason said it's not his job to mentor Malik Willis. And I know later in your career, you very much did find yourself in that mentor role. But at that stage, is it just different with every team you're at and what they're asking you to do?
Well, I think it's a couple of things. It's reflective of your personality, like however that feels to you when you interact in that room. I understood what the franchise did. They drafted Jamarcus Russell. He was to be the franchise. We were waiting on him to sign in camp. That was back in the days of the rookie deals that weren't slotted and there were long holdouts. And so we signed Dante Culpepper. Myself was on the roster, and then Andrew Walter. So we had these 3 kind of veteran guys that had played, a lot of football at that point, really, for everybody, and Dante especially. And so I think we were all helpful of Jamarcus. I don't know that I was as bent towards maybe as it was later in my career, because to your point, I was focused on trying to play the best football I could, but it was certainly, there was always information shared and trying to, to help that young player, be able to, grow in his career and all those things. But the old saying, more is caught than taught, I think. And I think you look at, what Ryan Tannehill was referencing. I think young players can come and learn so much just by watching the guy, just by, it may not necessarily be, sit down kind of interactive meetings where, veterans telling the rookie, this is how it goes. But you just watch his habits. You watch how he interacts with the team. You watch how he prepares in meetings. You watch how he takes notes. You watch how he conducts a walkthrough. And I think all those things are beneficial to a young player. And I know it was certainly beneficial to me to watch guys do that and then share that. And that's the fun thing I thought later in my career was to be able to not only impart some of those things to the young quarterbacks that we had drafted, Sam Darnold in New York and things like that, but also when you're kind of in the middle of the room and maybe there's another young quarterback at number 3 or, another young player. And so you can kind of bridge the gap for both those guys. That's a lot of fun as well. So, but I think, when you're in that room, it's got to be for the team. Everything's got to be about the team and getting the starter ready and helping everybody in the room, do as best they can. And, I know Ryan Tannehill, and I know that's where his heart is. It's about getting himself ready to play. And he knows that if he does that at a high level, when that young player, when Malik Willis watches him get ready, it's going to make him a better player as well. So I think, those things are, I thought that was a little, blown out proportion to a degree of just, where Ryan was coming from. But definitely when you're in that room, it's a sacred place. It's a hard position, one of the toughest positions in sports. You got to be all connected and all together.
Yeah. You played for 4 different organizations that I would consider to be notoriously bad at developing young quarterbacks. And you can probably think of them right now: Chicago, Cleveland, New York Jets, and Detroit. So when you're there and you're watching, or just in general, your experience with young quarterbacks, like what is it about, why do these specific organizations struggle with bringing up a young quarterback?
Well, that's a great question. And I think if we knew that, they'd probably be hiring us to, you and I would figure it out, and they'd hire us to run teams, because I think it's timing more than anything. And it's timing and it's the player. And quarterback is a position that is so dependent. We all depend on each other. It's so dependent on the guys around you. So when you draft that young player, inherent in drafting that young player high is typical that your team has been bad. So where is your roster at that point to bring a young player on board? And is it ready to handle those things? And are you ready to build around that guy and make decisions that can directly impact that guy? Joe Burrow, go draft Jamar Chase in year number 2, like directly help that dude. So I think those things are important. I believe, obviously Cleveland's been in the news a lot. They made decisions this offseason to try to enhance their quarterback room. But you look at where they were, how they built that roster, then they introduced Baker into it, and Baker was able to play winning football for them. And so I think that's a, something that people get lost on sometimes when you look at rookie quarterbacks, is where's the roster for that player when he comes onto the team, and what are the real chances of him being successful? And if he steps out, or if another guy plays and that guy doesn't have success either, then maybe your roster's not where it needs to be. But if somebody else plays and he's playing successful, then maybe you picked the wrong player, So every situation is unique. And this quarterback position is it's so hard to evaluate, because you just don't know from high school to college and college to pro what's going to translate and how a guy can process. But I think it's more than anything, where that roster is when you bring that player in, and the consistent structure around him to help that guy be great is so critical.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask you about quarterback battles and sort of the art of demoting or promoting quarterbacks during the season, during training camp. You've been through a few situations. You've been benched and brought up, and some of them have been kind of weird. I'm thinking about the Browns with Manziel partying during the bye week, and he gets benched for that, and then you get the job back. Tell me about the weirdest situation like that, or maybe the weirdest or like the worst way that a coach has handled that.
Oh, wow. The worst way. I went through a situation early in my career where I felt like, and I don't want to get into names, but I felt like I was being demoted, and it was kind of hidden behind an injury that was there, but it really wasn't there. And so that was a little weird, because, you're sitting there, you're saying, hey, I'm healthy. And they're going, well, you're not healthy. And it was just, so that was a weird one. One of my favorite ones, though, I will say, the Dolphins jerseys up there. I signed in free agency. I made it, to the middle of August, and then got traded to Carolina. But like I said, I was not having a great camp. And Favre comes out of retirement, goes to the Jets. The Jets then are shopping Pennington. Bill Parcells calls me in and says, hey, no hard feelings. I drafted Chad Pennington, so many years ago at the Jets, I'm gonna go get him. He's a good player. We believe in him, or whatever it was. And so we bring Chad in, and I got to see in a very short time, about a week or so, that Chad and I were teammates. Watch him prepare, lead a room, and it was fascinating. And it was a real credit to his ability as a leader and why he was able to stay in the league as long as he was. And of course, if you remember that year, 2008 maybe, that the Dolphins under the late Tony Sperano had an unbelievable run, got into the playoffs, and that was a lot of Chad. And so it was weird to be called in where you were competing to be the starter, and then to go from that to being traded. But it was very cool because of the success that Chad had, and to get to watch him for about 10 days or so that we were teammates, watch him lead our team and get those guys prepared. And I'll never forget, we're in a preseason game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he's sitting in the room, and he's got everybody in the offense, the skill players in the room, and he's going through every split with these guys. Okay, on this dig route, you're going to be on the top of the numbers, and you're going to break in there, boom, boom, boom. And he's telling all these guys, this is where I need you to be. And then, 2 days later, we're playing the preseason game in Jacksonville on the first drive. This dude's been on our roster for 3 days, and he goes bang, 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 right down the field for a touchdown. And it was just so impressive. And so I was bummed to get traded, but I was like, I learned a lot in that deal. So that's probably my favorite moment of when kind of a demotion happened. But it was still, for me, positive because it was something cool to learn there.
And when you say, the team that was demoting you behind an injury that you didn't really have, is there anything you can do in that? Like, what did you do in that situation? Did you try to go to the team doctor and be like, show them that I'm not hurt? Like, what could you do?
No, I mean, it was one of those things where it was more expressed in like, we're concerned about you going into this next game. You've been banged up. I was cleared, so it wasn't a team doctor thing as much as it was like, they were just, instead of just saying, hey man, we don't feel like you're doing well. And then kind of right towards the end of like, when, all right, hey, we're going to go with the other guy. It was like, well, we just think this other guy might give us a spark. And it was like, well, you could have said that all day, And so those things were a little bizarre. It was, I think sometimes front offices and coaches in general, we want to sugarcoat things for players to keep them in a good headspace. But a lot of times players, man, grown men deal with them straight and just say, hey, this is what it is, and this is why, and move forward. And so it was a good lesson for me to learn way back then.
Yeah. So it sounds like your guide to transitions of power is just honesty.
Yeah, it's the best policy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, and I know there's nuance, especially when you get into competition and not wanting to leak information. And I get all that, but when you're dealing person to person, especially within an organization, we're all stewards of belief in an organization. You have to maintain that belief at all times, and the belief is upheld by a lot of components. Trust is one of those major components that helps uphold belief in groups. And as soon as you don't have trust, then there's an area where that belief can be chipped away at. And so I just believe it's critical to build that with the group, and there's no better way to do that than deal honest with somebody.
Yeah. Before we get to our quick hitters, I do have to ask you about the Texans, because that's probably the most newsy thing that you've been involved in lately is the last hiring cycle. They were very interested in you as a head coach. You interviewed there. Then Brian Flores' lawsuit comes out, which is calling out discrimination in hiring in the NFL with minorities. And then all of a sudden the Texans are no longer interested in you. What happened there? Can you tell us anything about that process?
No, I would prefer to just talk about that. I was the backup quarterback for a little while there.
Yeah.
my last season and kind of leave it at that. It was the interview process was a good experience. I learned a lot, and
Yeah.
and they ultimately went a different direction. So I was honored to have an opportunity to sit down and go through that. And that they would think enough of me to be able to do that was I guess great experience for me. But yeah, all the other stuff, they went a different direction. That's good, and so wish them nothing but the best moving forward.
And I don't know if you are comfortable answering this, but what was I guess I'm wondering, like, with your experience as a backup quarterback, and you mentioned how often you were involved in more transitioning to sort of a coaching role as a backup. You never had that NFL coach like title exactly on your resume, but the backup role does involve a lot of that just naturally. Why do you think, like, what was your elevator pitch to be the head coach? Like, what makes you qualified?
I thought this is a backup quarterback deal.
I mean, it's related.
No, I think it's just the experiences that you have, throughout the league, and in that process, to a degree, it's more answering questions when you go through an interview process than it is necessarily, pitching someone, because you're right. It's different, especially the experience that I have was just because, I'm not coming in there with the kind of a lifelong coaching resume, but yeah. So, I think the experience over the last however many years towards the end of my career was very beneficial in the quarterback rooms that I was in, just because, especially as an older player, you just deal in so many different arenas within the organization as a backup quarterback, especially because you're connected to the starter, and you have a good voice or ear for him. And for me, some of these coaches, some of the coaches I was older than in the room, so they're firing questions at me, or some of these coaches I'd been around, before, and so you just get to know them, and you're trying to create ways to help the starter, play at his best, and so there's just a lot of interaction, which for me, you're functioning very similar to a coach, not probably quite the hours that those guys put in, but very similar, in some regards. And so I think those experiences are valuable. And, I'm coaching high school ball right now in Texas, and this is what I wanted to do. When I went to school, I wanted to be a high school football coach, and that's what I thought I was going to do. And then was fortunate to be able to play in the NFL as long as I did, and then never really until the back half of my career even thought about pro coaching. I thought I would just come back home and coach football, somewhere in Texas. So all those things are TBD. But certainly this last half of my career, as influential people in my life have kind of pointed me towards, hey man, you really ought to think about NFL coaching. It's allowed me to look at the last probably 6 or 7 years with a different lens. And I was out of the league and I got back in, and every year that I was back in, it was like an extra year. I really thought I was going to be done. I'd go and get cut by, go to Chicago, play there, get a contract in Tampa, get cut after 1 year. So I think I'm done. And I go to Cleveland for 2 years, and I think I'm done. And so all these things, I think I'm done. And of course, like as those things are going, people are, hey, would you come be our quarterback coach? Would you be interested in being our coordinator? Which, these things are coming up, and it's kind of starting to turn the wheels of like, maybe I do want to get into pro coaching. But then I kept playing, but it was fun to play, but look at and approach every day, not only as bringing value as the backup quarterback, like we talked about earlier, but also what can I learn from this head coach today? What can I learn from this offensive coordinator today? Of some of the things that they're doing well, some of the things that maybe we're not doing well. And so I'm very thankful for that, these last 6 or 7 years of my career and for the men that, said, you need to really think about coaching, at the pro level, because it's given me, I think, a great lens to look at, for 6 or 7 years as a player, but also thinking of coaching.
Yeah, that's amazing. So quick hitters now. So try to answer these as fast as you can.
Okay.
These best quarterback room you or your favorite quarterback room that you were a part of in your career?
Oh man.
I know it's hard.
Golly, this
That's
is gonna
gonna be
hurt
a
a lot
hard
of
one.
feelings. Like there's a few. I mentioned Jake Delhomme earlier. I loved being in that room. Jake Delhomme and Matt
Yeah.
Moore. That was a fun year. John Kitna and our man ESPN sensation Dan Orlovsky in Detroit was. I've never laughed as hard as I did that year. That was a great room. I enjoyed the year with Jay Cutler and Jason Campbell and Matt Blanchard. But we had a great time. The last season in Philly, Carson and my man Nate Sudfeld, that was a fun room. So all these rooms are like I said, they're sacred, they're special. The year in Tampa, Mike Glennon, and now offensive coordinator for the Giants, Mike Kafka. He's our third quarterback. He's in the room there, and you could see it all over Mike Kafka that he was going to be a great coach someday.
I want to get
Marcus
him.
Arroyo,
I want to get him on the show too.
Yeah, you got to get him on the show.
he'd be
Marcus
great.
Arroyo was our quarterback coach coordinator. That Tampa, that was a great room. And I think it's hard because fans say, "Great room." You guys won however many games. It's like it ain't about that. Like it always doesn't go your way, but when that room is tight and everybody has each other's back, it's really cool. And time of my life bringing on Sam Darnold into the league and just spending countless hours with him, just working with him and trying to help him grow. So that was a ton of fun. Davis Webb was our third quarterback that year. He was outstanding. He continues to have a career. So yeah, it's hard to single out just one.
Yeah.
And play with Hall of Famer Kurt Warner. That year was fantastic. My last season in Arizona, and that was special. So many of them. I can't. I would be a disservice to pick just one. I laughed a ton with my guy John Kitna and Dan Orlovsky that year in Detroit, though. That was a lot of fun.
So that's the funniest one. We can at least say that.
Yeah, for sure. And there's never a dull moment around Jay Cutler. That was awesome.
Yeah. Okay. Here's how well do you know your own career question. Week 13, 2013. Where were you? What was happening?
Week 13, 2013. Let's see. Were we playing Dallas Cowboys?
No.
Was it in Chicago? I was in Chicago.
You were playing for Chicago.
I played for Chicago, and
this was a good game for you.
Week 13, not the Cowboys, maybe the Packers?
No. Close. It's a division opponent.
Well, there's only two more. Well, let's see here. It wasn't the Packers. It was not the Lions. Vikings, I guess.
Vikings. Yep.
Yeah.
And it was
we're at Minnesota.
Yep.
We're at Minnesota. Yeah. We had them on the ropes. Had a long touchdown to Alshon Jeffrey, 2 long touchdowns to Alshon Jeffrey that game. And then they got the ball backed up, and their quarterback, Matt Castle, who, sometimes backup quarterback Matt Castle, led them down the field to win the game. I think get to overtime. Maybe they beat us in overtime, I think.
Yep. It was a 23-20 loss.
Yep, that's right.
Awesome. That was good, though. Good memory once we got there. Okay, one from the chat, and then we're going to do our challenge at the end. So chat has asked, is it hard for a backup quarterback to build chemistry with an offensive line, in particular the center?
It can be. One of the things that we say, this is a great question, chat. One of the things that we say from early on is, okay, adapt the starter's cadence. So, however he says it, you got to say it, because those 5 guys have been in there for however many weeks hearing it that way. So what 80 said, then you need to get in the mirror, record it, and say it over and over again to make it sound like what 80 said. It sounds just like the starter. It can't be any difference, because you're going to have, 5 dudes turn around and look at you like, hey man, what the heck, when they're getting offsides calls. So, and it starts with the center. So that is critically important. One of the things that you get to do sometimes as a backup is when there's run game or protection stuff, and maybe the starting quarterbacks overthrowing routes with the starting receivers is maybe you're doing some inside like run game protection stuff with the O-line. So you get to know them well. You get familiar with the calls, you get familiar with the protection calls. And I think when you can manage that for them and they know if you come into the game that there's not any extra load on their plate where they're having to all of a sudden now help you with protections or help you with this, that, and the other, I think it's a relief to them. So it's huge to have a great relationship with those guys, to keep their mind at ease if something does happen on a Sunday and you got to step into the game. But the number one thing, man, that cadence has got to be perfect.
Okay, great. Here we go. We're going to do our challenge. This is the last thing we'll do. I'm going to give you 1 minute on the clock.
Okay.
You're going to name as many current backup quarterbacks, and it can be a QB3 or even a QB4 at this point in the season. Someone who's not a starting quarterback, as many as you can in 1 minute, and I'm going to write them down for you so I'll be able to count them for you. All right,
awesome.
Here we go. Go.
All right, start out with a couple of my favorites. Let's go Teddy Bridgewater, Andy Dalton, stay in Florida, Blaine Gabbert, up in Philly, Gardner Minshew. One of those dudes in Pittsburgh is going to be Mason Crosby or Trubisky, or one of them as that plays out. Same thing in Carolina, Baker or Sam, one of those guys. Let's go Will Grier. Let's see, Tyrod Taylor. There's another great one. Chase Daniel, been in there forever. Golly.
20 seconds.
Running out of gas here.
20 seconds.
20
15,
seconds.
15.
Let's see here. Oh, Chad Henne, part of my story. Brought him into the league. Roommates way back in 08.
There we go. 10.
Let's see.
5.
I said Gardner
4.
Minshew. Mike White. You said that was Joe Flacco.
Yes.
There's another one.
Yes. Okay,
Huntley
that's it.
in
I had to
Baltimore.
cut you off. I had to cut you off at Flacco. All right. So all of these were correct. So you had 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to give you like 1 point each for the battles for like Mason Trubisky. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Amazing.
12. Okay. Probably should have been better.
12, technically 14 if I give you the two that, like, who knows if Trubisky is starting or Baker Sam. So technically you got 14 1 minute. I think that's pretty good. I think most people are not going to get anywhere near that.
Jacoby Brissett, that's another one I missed.
I know.
Hey, bonus points for Bridgewater. He's a legend. One of the best people in the NFL.
That's awesome. All right. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being our first guest on QB2. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully people learned some stuff about what it's like to be a backup quarterback. I know I did. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Enjoyed it.
Yeah.